This is a special report from News Channel 4.
Good evening once again. I'm Chuck Scarborough. We have more for you now on the crash of that TWA flight 800, a 747 bound from JFK Airport to Charles de Gaulle in Paris. Around 8:30 this evening, that aircraft plunged out of the sky and crashed 10 miles south of Mauritius Inlet in East Mauritius off the south shore of Long Island, as you can see on our map right there. We have now Jill Saltzman on the telephone. Jill, tell me where you are. You saw something out there, didn't you?
Yes, we live in West Hampton Beach. We were on Rogers Beach in West Hampton Beach, barbecuing with our children, and the kids were down by the ocean, and we saw a white light in the sky, like a light, and we just noticed the light, and all of a sudden we look up, and my kids, all of a sudden we see a red flash of fire, like we couldn't believe, come down into the ocean. And my children were by the shoreline, and they felt, they're 7, and they felt a wave. They felt not a wave, like a shock going through their bodies, like a gigantic explosion. They came running back up to us. We were cleaning up after our barbecue, and were absolutely hysterical, and we couldn't imagine what it was. And we thought maybe it was some kind of a weather satellite. We had no idea. And then I thought maybe it was a small plane. I said, I think it was a plane, but I thought maybe it was a tiny plane, which was horrible to us at any rate. And then we saw a helicopter flying out to the ocean a second after it happened, after we saw all this red flames go down, and then it cleared. And then we just saw one helicopter, and then we started hearing sirens, and then we left the beach, and it was quiet. And when we left, we heard more and more sirens coming, and we came home to, I said, let's put on the news to see if there's anything. I think it's probably something very minor because I don't want to scare the children. And then we see what it was, but it was a gigantic explosion. My son said he felt it from his feet to his stomach.
Jill, let me ask you, as the plane, when you saw the white light in the sky, about how high was that light, would you say?
It wasn't, I mean, I can't tell you how many, I would say, from where we were, I mean, West Hampton Beach is not that far from Mauritius or Shirley, but it didn't look like it was more than 500 feet. You know, it was out far, but we saw a white light. It was like an airplane light.
And then the flames you say you saw, did they plunge from the sky?
They funneled down. It was like a funnel, like when we saw the Apollo go down. When that went up, it funneled down. The red flames funneled down into the ocean, and then it dispersed. And that's what we saw. And then it was a tremendous, like a shock wave that the kids felt. We didn't feel it so much because we were way, way back, but we heard a boom. But they felt it, and they came running back and crying because they didn't know what it was. Now,
you told me you left the beach. Are you still in a position to see what's going on there, Jill?
No, we came home, which we are about 2 miles from the beach. And we were thinking of going back to the beach. We don't have a boat. We were just actually on the beach cooking. We were just came back to see what could it have been, not thinking it was anything as serious as it is.
Well, Jill, I thank you very much for sharing this eyewitness account with us. It helps us get a better picture of the story. Let me just give you a complete background as far as we know right now what's happened to this crash. This is the second eyewitness, actually the third eyewitness that I've talked to, second you've heard from, who has mentioned something happening in the air, seeing some flash or explosion or fire in the air, and then seeing that fire plunge into the water. Another fellow called me, Jim Lindstrom from Fairfield, Connecticut. He said he and his wife were standing looking over the sound, and they saw in the sky, in about that area, at about 8:30, a vertical streak right now. Now, somebody's talking to me right now. Tell me who we have. We have another witness. His name is Vic Center on the telephone right now. Vic?
Hello.
Vic, tell me what you saw and where you are.
I'm in East Mauritius. That's where I live. And I was out on the Mauritius Bay. I saw what looked like a flare at first. And it was coming down. It looked very slowly. You know, like a flare would come down, so a parachute-type flare. And all of a sudden it just blew up into a huge ball of flame. And one smaller one came off to one side, and that went out pretty quick. And then the other big one just rotated right on down until it disappeared.
The ball of flame was in the air, and then it continued to plunge toward the water?
Yes, it did. And just until it disappeared, I guess it was on fire right till it hit the water.
And then what happened?
I couldn't see it after that. That was too far out. I couldn't see anything.
And are you in a position right now to see anything that's going on the beach?
I can't see anything, but I'm like at home here. I can hear all the ambulances and rescue vehicles they're coming from all over.
And where you are, most of the firemen out there, I imagine, are volunteer firemen, aren't they, in that area?
Yes.
So I would expect that most of them have probably been dispatched to the scene, have volunteered for duty?
Yes, everybody there is a volunteer, sure.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your sharing your observations with us right now. We have Andrew Glassman at Kennedy Airport. This flight, as I told you, TWA Flight 800 departed Kennedy Airport bound for Paris this evening with 212 passengers, 17 crew, and went down around 8:30. Andrew Glassman is standing by at Kennedy. Andrew?
Chuck, I just arrived here at the TWA International Terminal at John F. Kennedy Airport, the site where this aircraft departed shortly after 7 o'clock tonight. It's the nightly 7 p.m. flight from JFK to Paris. There is a heavy police presence here at this point. They are preparing now for the inevitable that families will return to the airport. People who dropped off their loved ones just a few hours ago, they're anticipating their return here. They're attempting to make the breaking of the news and the dealing with this tragedy as comfortable as possible for the families and the friends and the relatives of the victims of this plane crash. From police sources here at Kennedy Airport, we've been able to discern the following information. We have a slightly different head count in terms of how many people were on the aircraft. Here they're telling us that there were 178 passengers on the aircraft and that it was a crew of 14 people for a total of 192 persons on board. That slightly differs with earlier estimates, although there's no definitive word either way at this point. They're also telling us that the Coast Guard arrived at the scene 12 miles off Southampton, that the Coast Guard reported seeing rafts in the water upon their arrival there, but there's no word of any survivors or deceased at this point. We're told that the Coast Guard contingent now consists of 10 rescue ships and 6 helicopters above the scene of the crash. And we're also told here from employees of TWA at the airport that this flight crew of 14, they say, they tell us that the flight crew is a New York-based flight crew, not a Paris-based flight crew. At this point, again, the police are here trying to make the breaking of the news, the inevitable arrival of the families here at the airport, as comfortable and as dignified as possible, Chuck.
All right, Andrew, thank you. Can't imagine the anguish that those families are enduring right now, hoping against hope that somehow their loved ones will have survived this tragedy. And from what we've been able to gather from the wires and the scatter reports coming in, although rafts were spotted by the first aircraft by the Coast Guard that flew over the scene, there have been no survivors reported yet. There was a report that bodies were beginning to turn up, and I'm seeing on the wires now that a temporary morgue has been set up in the vicinity of the crash on the beach there. The Coast Guard dispatched quite an flotilla of rescue craft, everything they had available. Every aircraft they had, they put into the air, which consisted of 6 helicopters, at least 1 Falcon jet, and the Navy added a P-3 Orion search plane. The Air National Guard, I'm told by the Coast Guard, also sent up an aircraft to try to help too. And of course, the local police and rescue operations would have gone into high gear in the area to try to effect this rescue. Andrew said there is some conflicting report now about the number of passengers and crew on board. Initially, it was reported 212 passengers, 17 crew. Andrew said he has information indicating 178 passengers, 14 crew. We can only hope for the smaller number, given the circumstances. And I believe we have one more eyewitness on the telephone now, somebody else who saw the crash. Melissa Croak, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Melissa, tell me what you saw.
Well, I was coming back from Watermill heading west at approximately 8:20, 8:25 this evening, and I saw a red dot in the sky, knew it was an airplane, and then I noticed that it was coming down. I was with my daughter, and I said to her, "Oh, my God, there's a plane crashing." Well, no sooner had I said those words than a huge, tremendous red ball exploded. And on either side of the red ball, it was like the sun exploding, except it was red. No orange, no yellow, just red. There were 2 red lines coming down parallel. There was no noise. I came home convinced that I had seen a plane crash, but I didn't hear anything else about it, so I thought maybe the Coast Guard was having a drill until somebody called me with the news. And that's pretty much all I saw.
Well, that was certainly startling enough to see that in the sky.
Yes,
thank you very much. I appreciate you calling in here, and I've got to interrupt you here now because moving on the wires now, the Coast Guard has confirmed it is removing bodies from the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Long Island at the site of that TWA jet crash. They are pulling bodies out of the ocean now as that search and rescue operation continues. Let's check one more time with Andrew Glassman, who's standing by Kennedy Airport. Andrew, any further word there?
Well, Chuck, the only information we've been able to discern in the past few minutes comes from the Port Authority, which tells us that TWA will be holding a briefing and will be briefing reporters momentarily, shortly. We don't know how long that's going to be, but they plan to do that over in the domestic terminal, not here in the international terminal, perhaps to deflect some of the attention away from the people who will be arriving here, to make that easier on them and to have less of a distraction here. And we certainly will be checking in to see the latest details from that. In the last few minutes, we've seen some clergy members and one rabbi, it appeared, arrive here at the terminal, perhaps to make the inevitable breaking of the news inside there more comfortable for the people who are set to arrive momentarily.
All right, Andrew, thank you. You'll stand by at Kennedy Airport for us. And, of course, while the rescue operation is going on, the search and the recovery of the bodies, we have to tell you that the spokesman is now saying that there is no word of survivors on TWA Flight 800 bound from JFK to Paris. And while that goes on, already investigators of the National Transportation Safety Board are beginning to think about the investigation that lies ahead, what they must try to do to try to put together the mystery, the pieces about what happened to this flight. They will, of course, be most interested in recovering the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder that now presumably lie at the bottom of the ocean, 10 miles off the south shore of Long Island. And they will build what is sort of an inverted pyramid with all the possibilities at the top and begin to eliminate possibilities for causing this crash. Was it structural failure? Was it cockpit crew error? Was it some sort of sabotage, an explosive device of some kind that went off to cause the airplane to crash? Was it an engine failure? Any of these possibilities have to be listed and have to be one by one eliminated until finally at the bottom of the pyramid, the National Transportation Safety Board will decide and determine what the cause of this crash was. And there are obvious security concerns right now, too. Certainly, the government is quite concerned about what may have caused this crash, and if there are any implications for our national security and our war against terrorism, keeping our guard up on that account. I have an FAA official on the telephone right now. I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is, but could you tell me, sir, and tell me where you are?
Yes, this is Elliot Brenner with the FAA.
On the third, not all team members were allowed to pass.
Mr. Brenner, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Is this Chuck?
Security Council Wednesday.
Hey, Elliot.
Go ahead.
Paul Rochelle, how you doing?
Carl, stand by. Let me take care of NBC New York.
We're really fed up
Okay.
with being, told one thing, only to find that the Iraqis are doing another.
Oh, you might want to roll on it and just cut the questions.
Okay, stand by one.
And there were no survivors.
All right, let's back away here just a second and see if we can get a clear line with Elliot Brenner. Obviously, there was an awful lot of, that was the FAA Communication Center. There was an awful lot of confusion going on there, quite understandable. So if the people in the control room will let me know if we have Mr. Brenner of the FAA able to speak with us, I'd like to talk to them about exactly what they intend to do. In the meantime, for those of you just joining us, I will go back over what happened here and try to bring you up to date. As far as I know, let me just check the wires here to make certain that we're not getting any more information on this crash. This was TWA Flight 800 that went down off the south shore of Long Island. About 8:30 this evening, it had taken off from JFK Airport, was en route to Paris, France, Charles de Gaulle Airport there. We have conflicting reports on how many people were on board, anywhere from 178 to 212 passengers, 14 crew members to 17 crew members on board. And sad to say that even though wreckage and rafts were spotted in the water, that there is no word from the Coast Guard about any survivors. The Coast Guard has reported already pulling bodies out of the crash site. And I've got something here from a quote from MSNBC is quoting the Pentagon right now. They're saying the word it got was that the plane appeared to explode in midair at about 8,000 feet. The Pentagon, as I was indicating a moment ago, would be quite interested if, in fact, there was some sort of mid-air explosion that led to the downing of TWA Flight 800. All this is pure speculation. It could be any one of hundreds of different things that would have caused this crash tonight. But one thing is absolutely certain. The people who put their loved ones on that plane, all of whom were looking forward to a trip to Paris this evening and probably were in high spirits, now are in terrible shock and suffering terrible grief, thinking of what fate befell their loved ones. TWA Flight 800 on the way from JFK to Paris, France. We will, of course, keep you up to date on this story. And am I getting something else in here before we... Okay, let's take a look at Kennedy Airport right now. We have, is this our Skycam? Well, that is a live shot right now of Kennedy Airport. Here is the camera we have out front at the TWA terminal. Those of you who fly in and out of Kennedy will recognize that modernistic shape of TWA. You can see that we have police officers standing out front, clearly in force. They're obviously to maintain control and try to maintain security on that end and help with the families who are returning to the airport. We have now a former National Transportation Safety Board investigator, Ira Furman, on the line with us. And Ira, I was doing a layman's description of what you guys are going to be up to, what the NTSB will do, given what happened tonight. Why don't you give us the professional version?
The National Transportation Safety Board will be sending a team out from Washington to link up with the people locally. And their first efforts will be to divide into teams to look at different aspects of a crash investigation. Of course, there'll be an effort made to try to recover the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. They'll also be trying to recover from the FAA's facilities the communications that occurred between the aircraft and any air traffic controller before this plane went down. They'll be talking, of course, to survivors, and I hope there are many, including flight crew members, which is, of course, always valuable in an investigation. I might also note that one of the issues people are talking about an explosion, they're talking about a fire. In my experience with the safety board, we find that witnesses are terribly unreliable. I point out that, of course, it was dark, and this aircraft would have been many thousands of feet in the air. That leads me to believe the possibility that when people saw a fire and heard an explosion, if they heard any, it was more akin to what's called a flame out of an engine, and that's a situation much like a backfire in an automobile. We've all, I think, in our life been startled by a backfire and perhaps even seen some flame shoot out the exhaust pipe of an automobile. The same kind of phenomenon will occur on an airplane, and a 747 is an aircraft with 4 engines, so there is opportunity for people to see a flame out, hear an explosion, see some fire, and not have it in any way relate to the cause of the accident.
So, Ira, when you say you're dividing, your teams are divided, the NTSB GO team is divided into different groups. Can you give me the names of the groups and what each one will be assigned and be looking at?
Okay, remind you, I'm formally with the NTSB, but the process is going to be the same. There will be people who will be looking at the engines. There'll be people looking at the aircraft structure to the extent it's recovered. Others looking at the aircraft maintenance and the age of the aircraft. They'll be looking at air traffic control communications. They'll be looking at the pilots, the flight crew history, their record of performance, their hours on duty, and so forth, their rest times, and all of those kinds of things. To the extent the aircraft is recovered, they'll be looking at the avionics, that is the instrumentation of the aircraft, checking for fuel contamination, doing whatever is possible. The safety board works on the principle that we are not going to exclude any possibilities. We're going to look at all things, kind of keep an open mind as the investigation begins.
As a former investigator, what's your gut telling you right now?
I really don't have a gut feeling, except to the extent that I would bet that people are wrong in talking in terms of an in-flight explosion. I think it's a consequence of the attitude of the aircraft, that is, not sufficient air going through the engines and that causing a flame out. Of course, I point out to you that the Federal Bureau of Investigation will be participating in this accident investigation, at least initially, until an explosion on board is ruled out, if in fact it can be ruled out.
All right, Ira, I'm going to hold you for just a second. If you would stand by, I want to get back to you, but I want to check now with Andrew Glassman at Kennedy Airport. Andrew, you have more information for us.
Chuck, there's very little information here, even among the TWA officials who are walking around the terminals at this point. But a moment ago, I did see a TWA supervisor, and I walked up to her and asked her if there had been any threats or any problems here toward international flights or any flights in the past few days, and she did say no, and that was the second employee who told me that no, in fact, there was no heightened sense of security in the past 24, 48, 72 hours, and that this flight left on time today and without incident. Again, it's the 7 p.m. scheduled daily departure from JFK to Charles de Gaulle Airport. So certainly when we hear talk of flames in midair, it brings back memories of some past airliner bombings. At this point, at least, the airline supervisor that I spoke with here said that there had been no sense of heightened awareness or security surrounding this flight or any other in the past few days.
All right, Andrew, thank you. Now, Ira, if you're still on the phone here, of course, help me if my memory's a little off here, but I think the last time a 747 plunged out of the sky, it was over Lockerbie, Scotland. It was Pan Am Flight 103, and that indeed did turn out to be sabotage, a terrorist bomb on board the airplane. The 747 is a very reliable plane with a long history, and it's certainly highly unusual to have one of them just plunge out of the sky like that, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is, and your memory may not be good enough, but I actually accompanied Ben Farnsworth to Lockerbie, Scotland, and was helping him in that coverage as a consultant at that time. So I was out at the scene of that horrific disaster. I point out to you that we now have life rafts in the water, at least according to the latest reports I've heard.
Yes.
And that suggests to me, again, that there was not a mid-air explosion, anything akin to the Lockerbie scenario, because you would have had very, very widespread wreckage, and you would have had people so totally disabled by that crash that nobody could have opened the exit doors and started the life rafts out.
It's not possible the life rafts would simply deploy and then survive the impact with the water?
Well, they would deploy if doors came open because they are set up in such a way that they would deploy automatically. But that kind of scenario is not a reasonable one.
So you're saying that because the life rafts are deployed, the plane may have landed in more or less one piece in the water?
That's. I think it may have landed one piece in the water. I also believe it's possible that, again, depending on the number of life rafts, if we have survivors and we have life rafts in the water, there's a good chance that this was what we would call a ditching, that is a landing, an attempted landing at sea. And again, that the fire that was seen had to do with flame outs of the engine, but that was not the cause of this aircraft coming down. That's, of course, informed speculation at this point, nothing more.
Sure, I understand that, and I thank you very much. If you'll stand by, Ira, we appreciate your expertise in this, and we certainly hope that your analysis based on very thin information right now is the correct one, that the plane did come down in one piece and that there is the possibility of survivors, although so far the Coast Guard has reported spotting none. John Miller is standing by right now on a boat. John?
Chuck, I'm en route to the scene now, just leaving Shinnecock Inlet towards Moriches Inlet where the plane went down. As we approach the scene in the distance, you can start to see some of the aerial activity. We can't see the lights of the boat yet, but over Coast Guard's emergency channel 16, they are calling on private vessels who are calling in over the emergency frequency to proceed 10 miles south of the location and stand by. Literally what they are doing is kind of amassing an auxiliary flotilla to aid in the search. They say they have a lot of people on the scene now, but they can still use some help. So those who call in are being directed to kind of a mobilization location. They're also asking the vessels to be ready to give up whatever blankets and other things they have that may aid in the rescue and comforting of survivors and those who may not have survived. They're also asking over that frequency for the marinas who are checking in to stay open so that they have plenty of fuel on hand, or whatever fuel there is on hand that can be used by the Coast Guard boats, the Southampton Police Marine units, and all the other law enforcement and rescue boats at the scene, as well as the private boats that are trying to aid them. As we get closer to the scene, I'll give you some more, but there's a lot of activity there now.
We'll expect to hear from you as soon as you get out there, and let us know as you get a little closer, and of course if you participate in the rescue operation. Again, I'm still scanning the wires here to see if there is any indication of survivors. I certainly hope there are. But so far, there is nothing that's moved on the wires, and we've heard nothing from any source that survivors have been found as this search continues now. The plane went down at 8:30. It is now almost 11 o'clock. That was 2.5 hours ago, and the search and rescue mission continues at this time. Bodies are being recovered. That we have seen over the wires. The Coast Guard has confirmed they are pulling bodies out of the water. A temporary morgue has been set up. Now, Chuck Gomez, you've just joined us. You've come down here. What information do you have to add to this?
We understand the TWA has just provided a number for relatives who might have any passengers on that flight. The number is 1-800-438-9892. They're telling people who have relatives to call that number if they have any information. That's what we have right now.
And the TWA gave you nothing else other than the number to...
No, we just have the number. They're telling people to keep calm. They're trying to get information. There was an initial glimmer of hope when life rafts were seen on the water, and so TWA is saying they want people to be calm, and this is the number that they've given at this point.
All right, Chuck, thank you for coming down with that, certainly, and we can put that number back up again. I think we ought to leave that on the screen for just a little while here, so people who had relatives or friends or loved ones who were on TWA Flight 800 that departed tonight from JFK Airport bound for Paris can call that number to get information about what they should do now that that flight has been confirmed to have crashed off the south shore of Long Island. John Miller is still en route. John, you still on the phone with us? I don't hear John Miller, but we still have Ira Furman. Ira, I'm looking here at the wires, and now I see that people as far away as Connecticut reported seeing what looked like flares over the water, an explosion in the sky. Does that change your opinion at all?
I'm here.
Ira? Well, I guess we lost them both. I'm sorry about that, but I'll just tell you what this is. I heard actually earlier this evening from one Connecticut resident who lived in the Fairfield area who was looking out over Long Island Sound and said he saw a streak, a vertical streak, that he described as sort of red and orange, that plunged out of the sky. If you calculate how far away Fairfield, Connecticut is from the area of the explosion and crash, it's quite a distance all the way on the other side of Long Island Sound, somewhat to the west, and looking across the Sound across Long Island, it would indicate that what he saw was fairly high in the air. He did not report seeing an explosion of any kind, simply a vertical streak of light that he thought was extraordinary. And when he heard about the plane crash, he called in